Freud proposed that the development of an individual's personality is derived from the dynamics of the unconscious mind, where one's past experiences is the major determinant of future behaviour. He believed the structure of the mind was composed of three things: the conscious, which is thoughts that we are aware of; the pre-conscious, which is thoughts that are not conscious but can be made conscious; and the unconscious, which is thoughts that are inaccessible to our consciousness and we cannot become aware of these thoughts. Freud also believed that there were three mental forces at play to determine a person's personality: the id, the ego, and the superego. The id operates mainly during the first three psychosexual stages. More on that in a moment. These instincts or irrational needs require immediate gratification. Development is therefore partially dependent on the transformation of the so-called animal desires into socially acceptable, rational behaviour, and this is achieved through the maturity of the ego and the superego. It contains the basic motivation drives for our physiological needs such as food, water, sex and warmth, and all our emotions are housed in the id, as well as all unconscious forces. The superego appears when the child is approximately 5 years old. It operates on the perfection principle. The superego consists of the morals taught by society. It exercises control over the ego and id's urges. It makes the individual feel good for having behaved according to society's morals. The ego is the servant of the id. The ego's purpose is to satisfy the desires or demands of the id, but restrains the id's demands until they can be met according to the norms of society. The ego is equivalent to the self, the you within you. Sometimes we find ourselves in situations where a resolution can't be made between the id, ego and superego. And so as a result, the ego resolves the conflict through the use of defense mechanisms. Defense mechanisms are a variety of cognitive techniques which prevent a person from accessing thoughts or project the thoughts towards some other unrelated object. This allows the person to handle the conflict indiscriminately. However, the unconscious thoughts and feelings still have an influence on our behaviour. Freud saw people's personality as based on desire, or the id, rather than on reason, the ego and superego. And this stemmed from his theory of the psychosexual stages of behaviour, which develops in childhood. These 5 stages, oral, anal, phallic, latency and genital, must be developed. Interruption or incompletion of each of these stages during childhood would result in a fixation, which is a preoccupation with a particular stage throughout life. These repressions often resulted in defense mechanisms, such as regression, sublimation, and all the ones we mentioned before. Coping or defense mechanisms begin to develop as children attempt to avoid failure or rejection in the face of life's growing expectations and demands. In summary, Freud believed a person's personality is defined by the resolution of conflict between the three mental forces: id, ego, and superego. Failure to resolve that conflict between those three mental forces would often result in someone enacting a defense mechanism in order to avoid any anxiety-inducing thoughts. Our ability to resolve these conflicts is determined by the 5 psychosexual stages of development.